I never thought I'd be that guy, the one who walks in on his wife cheating. You hear about it all the time. Friends of friends, co-workers swapping stories over beers, or some dramatic scene in a movie. But you never think it'll happen to you. Not me. Not my life. It was supposed to be a routine business trip, a quick 3-day jaunt to Chicago for meetings that ended early. The flight back home was uneventful, as were the hours spent staring out the window thinking about how good it would feel to sleep in my own bed again. I even stopped by the grocery store on the way home, picking up her favorite red wine because, hell, why not? It had been a long week, and we both deserved a little treat. But when I walked through the front door, everything changed. The house was quiet at first, too quiet. Then I heard them before I saw them. Her voice, sharp and urgent. Stop it. My heart froze mid-beat. What the hell? I dropped my bag by the door, the bottles of wine clinking softly against each other. My feet carried me toward the sound without permission from my brain. Every step felt heavier than the last, like gravity itself knew what was coming and wanted to slow me down. And then I heard him. A man's voice, smooth, cocky, dripping with confidence. You don't want me to stop. In fact, I don't even want to wait until we get to the bedroom. We'll do it right here on the back of this couch. Just take off your panties because last time it. That's where he stopped talking. Because that's where I stopped walking. They were in the living room, standing near the couch where we used to binge-watch Netflix together. Where she'd snuggled up under a blanket while I complained about work. Where our lives had played out, ordinary and predictable, until now. She looked at me first, her eyes wide with panic, cheeks flushed, not just from embarrassment but from something else entirely. And him. He turned slowly, like he couldn't believe anyone would dare interrupt. Like he owned the place. For a moment, no one said anything. Time stood still, and all I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears. My mind raced, trying to process what I was seeing. My wife, hair mussed, lips swollen, standing there like a deer caught in headlights. Him, tall and smug, leaning casually against the armrest of the couch like he belonged there. Then came the anger. Oh, God, the anger. It hit me like a freight train, burning through every ounce of shock and disbelief. My hands clenched into fists so tight they hurt. Revenge wasn't just an idea, it was instinct. Immediate. Visceral. Without thinking, I grabbed the nearest thing I could reach, one of those heavy glass bottles of wine I'd picked up earlier. Before either of them could react, I hurled it straight at him. It shattered against the wall behind him, sending shards of glass flying everywhere. He stumbled back, cursing, holding his arm where a piece must have grazed him. What the fuck, man? He shouted, finally losing that arrogant smirk. You think you can waltz into my house and fuck my wife? I yelled, my voice shaking with rage. Get the hell out. He didn't need to be told twice. Grabbing his jacket off the floor, he bolted toward the door, muttering threats under his breath. I didn't care. Let him run. Let him tell everyone what happened. None of that mattered anymore. She tried to speak, tried to explain, but I cut her off. Don't, I spat, pointing a finger at her. Don't you dare say a word. Her face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks. For once, she looked small. Fragile. Not the strong, confident woman I'd married. Just someone weak enough to throw away everything we had for a cheap thrill. I should have felt satisfaction. Triumph. Justice served. But instead, I felt hollow. Empty. Like I'd won a battle but lost the war. After that, things moved quickly. She packed a bag and left within the hour, too ashamed, or maybe too scared, to stay. The house felt eerily quiet afterward, the kind of silence that presses down on you until it's hard to breathe. Revenge might have been immediate, but healing? That's going to take a lot longer. Days turned into weeks, but the silence in the house didn't get any easier to bear. Every room felt like a ghost town, haunted by memories I couldn't escape. The couch, that couch, still sat in the living room, untouched since that night. I avoided it at all costs, opting instead to sleep on the recliner in my office. It wasn't comfortable, but nothing about this situation was supposed to be. I told myself I was handling it well. Better than most people would, anyway. I went to work every day, answered emails, nodded along during meetings, but inside, I was crumbling. My coworkers noticed something was off. They'd ask if I was feeling okay, if everything was all right at home. I always gave them the same vague answer, just tired. No one pressed further, which was fine by me. How could I explain something I barely understood myself? At night, though, when the distractions faded and the world quieted down, there was no escaping it. That voice, the man's voice, echoed in my head like a broken record. You don't want me to stop, over and over again, taunting me, mocking me, reminding me that she chose him, even if only for a moment. And then there were the questions. So many questions. Why? When did it start? Was it just him, or were there others? Did she ever love me at all? Each one gnawed at me like a rat chewing through insulation, leaving behind nothing but doubt and despair. But the worst part? The guilt. Not because of what I'd done. That guy deserved every ounce of fear he felt when that wine bottle shattered inches from his face, but because of how I reacted afterward. I let anger take control. I threw her out without giving her a chance to explain. Hell, I didn't even want an explanation. All I wanted was for her to disappear so I wouldn't have to look at her anymore. Now, alone in this empty house, I wondered if maybe I should have listened. Maybe I owed her that much, at least. After all, we'd built a life together, shared dreams, made promises. Or had all of that been a lie too? One evening, about 3 weeks after the incident, I came home to find a package on the porch. It was small, wrapped in brown paper with no return address. My name was scrawled across the front in handwriting I recognized immediately. My stomach dropped as I carried it inside, setting it on the kitchen counter like it might explode. For a long time, I just stared at it. Part of me wanted to throw it away unopened. Whatever she had to say, did I really need to hear it? But curiosity won out in the end. With trembling hands, I tore open the package. Inside was a letter, not typed, but handwritten in her careful cursive. Beneath it lay a keychain I'd given her years ago, shaped like a tiny silver heart. She used to joke that it was cheesy, but she kept it anyway. Seeing it now made my chest tighten. I unfolded the letter and began to read. Dear, I know you probably hate me right now, and honestly, I don't blame you. What I did was unforgivable, and I'll spend the rest of my life regretting it. I never meant to hurt you. I swear that's the truth. But intentions don't change facts, and the fact is, I broke your trust. I broke us. You deserve better than the way I treated you. Better than the lies, the excuses, the shame. You deserve someone who will cherish you the way you deserve to be cherished. Someone who won't make the same mistakes I did. I'm not writing this to beg for forgiveness or to justify what happened. There's no excuse for what I did. I needed you to know that I'm sorry. Truly, deeply sorry. And if there's any way I can make things right, even just a little bit, I hope you'll let me try. The keychain was yours to begin with. I thought you should have it back. Take care of yourself. By the time I finished reading, tears were streaming down my face. Not angry tears, but sad ones. Exhausted ones. The kind that come when you've held everything in for so long that your body has no choice but to let it out. Part of me wanted to call her, to yell, to scream, to demand answers, but another part of me knew it wouldn't solve anything. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't even about her. It was about me. About finding a way to move forward, however impossible that seemed. Over the next few days, I started making changes. Small ones, at first. I cleaned the house from top to bottom, scrubbing every surface until it gleamed. I donated clothes we'd bought together, packed away photos of us, rearranged furniture to make the space feel less familiar. It wasn't enough to erase the pain, but it helped. Little by little, I began to reclaim the pieces of my life that had been stolen. Then, one Saturday morning, I woke up with a strange sense of clarity. I realized I couldn't keep living like this, stuck in limbo, paralyzed by anger and grief. If I wanted to heal, I had to do something drastic. Something that terrified me more than anything else. I decided to see a therapist. It wasn't easy. Opening up to a stranger about my failures, my insecurities, my darkest moments, it felt unnatural at first. But slowly, week by week, I started to untangle the mess inside my head. I learned that forgiveness isn't about excusing bad behavior. It's about freeing yourself from the burden of holding onto it. I learned that moving on doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing to focus on the future instead of dwelling on the past. Eventually, I stopped thinking about her every single day. The sound of his voice faded. The ache in my chest dulled. Life didn't feel perfect, or even close to it, but it felt manageable. And for now, that was enough. Months later, I found myself sitting on the back porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt hopeful. Like maybe, just maybe, happiness wasn't completely out of reach. And as I sat there, sipping a beer and letting the cool breeze wash over me, I realized something important. Revenge might have been immediate, but healing takes time. And sometimes, the hardest battles are the ones worth fighting. It had been nearly 6 months since that night. 6 months since I'd held a wine bottle at a stranger, watched my wife walk out the door, and started the long, grueling process of piecing myself back together. Life wasn't perfect. I still woke up some mornings with a knot in my stomach, wondering if I'd ever fully recover, but it was better. Progress, no matter how slow, felt like progress. Therapy helped more than I could have imagined. My therapist, Dr. Alvarez, had a way of cutting through the noise in my head and forcing me to face truths I'd rather ignore. She challenged me to think about forgiveness, not just for her, but for myself. You're carrying guilt too, she said during one session. For reacting the way you did. For not being the bigger person. But anger is human. It's valid. Don't punish yourself for feeling it. Her words stuck with me. Slowly, I began to let go of the shame I'd been clinging to. I stopped replaying the scene in my mind every time I closed my eyes. Stopped wondering what I could have done differently to prevent it all. Instead, I focused on the present. On rebuilding. I even started dating again, or at least trying to. It wasn't easy. Putting yourself out there after years of marriage feels like standing on stage naked, vulnerable to judgment from everyone. The first few dates were awkward disasters. One woman talked non-stop about her ex-husband. Another spent the entire evening scrolling through her phone. But then there was Claire. Claire was different. She was warm, funny, smart, everything I needed without realizing it. We met at a coffee shop downtown. Yes, cliché, but sometimes clichés work. When she accidentally spilled half her latte on my shoe. Sorry, she laughed, grabbing napkins to clean up the mess. Guess this means you'll never agree to a second date. We ended up talking for hours that day, sharing stories about our lives, our families, our failures. By the end of it, I realized I hadn't thought about my ex-wife once. Not once. That alone felt like a victory. Things moved slowly between us, and that was okay. Neither of us was in a rush to dive headfirst into something serious. Still, spending time with Claire made me feel alive in ways I hadn't in years. For the first time, I allowed myself to imagine a future that didn't revolve around regret. But just as I started to believe I was finally moving forward, the past came knocking. One Saturday afternoon, as I was sorting through some old boxes in the garage, I found a manila envelope tucked away in the corner. At first, I didn't recognize it. It looked like something I'd shoved aside during one of my cleaning sprees and forgotten about. Curious, I opened it. Inside were documents. Bank statements, emails, text messages, all tied to my ex-wife. My hands trembled as I flipped through them, my heart pounding harder with each page. What I discovered turned my world upside down. She hadn't cheated on me because she fell out of love with me. She hadn't done it because she wanted excitement or passion or any of the reasons I'd assumed. No, she'd done it because she was desperate. Desperate to escape. The texts told the story. Someone had been blackmailing her. Someone who knew about financial mistakes she'd made years ago. Mistakes she'd hidden from me out of fear I'd judge her. They threatened to expose her unless she cooperated. And cooperating meant, well, it meant doing things she didn't want to do. Including sleeping with that guy. I sat there on the cold concrete floor of the garage, the papers scattered around me, unable to breathe. All this time, I'd hated her. Hated myself. Blamed her for ruining our marriage. But the truth? The truth was so much worse, and yet, somehow, it made everything clearer. That night, I called her. It took every ounce of courage I had to dial her number, unsure if she'd even answer. When she picked up, her voice sounded hesitant, almost wary. "Hi," I said, my throat tight. "It's me." There was a long pause before she responded. "Hey, is everything okay?" "No," I admitted. "Not really. Look, I need to talk to you. Can we meet somewhere? Please." Another pause. Then, softly, "Okay." We agreed to meet at a park near her apartment the next morning. The air was crisp, the sky overcast, as I waited for her on a bench overlooking a lake. When she arrived, she looked smaller somehow, like the weight of the world had pressed her down. She sat beside me, clutching a cup of coffee like it might anchor her to reality. "I found some things," I began, my voice shaking. "Documents. Texts. Blackmail." Her eyes widened, and for a moment, she looked like she might cry. "Oh God," she whispered. "You weren't supposed to find those. Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my tone gentler than I expected. "Why didn't you come to me?" "Because I was scared," she admitted, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Scared you'd hate me. Scared you'd leave anyway. I thought if I could handle it on my own, maybe I could protect you. Protect us." I stared at her, my chest aching. So much pain, so much misunderstanding. If only we'd communicated, if only I'd listened instead of lashing out, maybe things would have been different. "I don't know what happens next," I said finally. "But I can't keep living like this. Carrying all this anger, this guilt. I need answers. I need closure." She nodded, wiping her tears. "Me too." In the weeks that followed, we talked. Really talked. About the blackmail, about our marriage, about everything we'd left unsaid. It wasn't easy. In fact, it was excruciating at times, but it was necessary. Together, we decided to report the blackmailer to the authorities. It wasn't just about justice. It was about reclaiming control over our lives. As for us, well, that remained complicated. Too much damage had been done for us to simply pick up where we left off. But for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful, not necessarily about us, but about the possibility of healing, of finding peace. Revenge might have been immediate, but forgiveness? Forgiveness takes time. And maybe, just maybe, that's the point. Reporting the blackmailer wasn't easy. It required reliving every painful detail, exposing wounds I thought had started to heal. But it was necessary, not just for justice, but for clarity. For months, I'd carried around this tangled mess of anger, guilt, and confusion, convinced that my wife's betrayal was the root of all my pain. Now, with the truth laid bare, I realized the real villain wasn't her or even the man she'd slept with. It was the circumstances that pushed her into a corner so dark she felt she had no other choice. The police took our statements, piecing together evidence from the texts and emails I'd found. They assured us they'd pursue charges against the blackmailer, a man named Victor Kane, who turned out to be a low-level con artist preying on people's secrets. As grateful as I was for their efforts, the process left me drained. Sitting in those sterile interrogation rooms, recounting intimate details of my marriage, made me feel raw and exposed. By the time it was over, I wanted nothing more than to crawl into bed and sleep for a week. But life doesn't pause for anyone, not even when you're barely holding yourself together. Claire noticed something was off almost immediately. She called me one evening after work, her voice soft with concern. "You've been quiet lately," she said. "Is everything okay?" I hesitated, unsure how much to share. Claire knew bits and pieces of my past, the infidelity, the divorce, but not the full story. Not the blackmail, the lies, or the emotional toll it had taken on both me and my ex-wife. Did I owe her the whole truth? Or would sharing it only complicate things further? "I've just had a lot on my mind," I admitted finally. "Some unresolved stuff from my marriage." There was a pause, then, "Do you want to talk about it?" Her kindness nearly broke me. Here was someone willing to listen without judgment, offering support without expectation. And yet, I couldn't bring myself to open up completely. Instead, I gave her a vague summary, enough to explain my distance without delving too deeply into the chaos of my past. "Thanks for understanding," I said before ending the call. "I'll get through it." But getting through it wasn't as simple as I hoped. Every step forward seemed to come with 2 steps back. Conversations with my ex-wife brought moments of catharsis, but they also reopened old wounds. Seeing her face reminded me of everything we'd lost, the trust, the intimacy, the dreams we'd shared. Forgiveness felt like an uphill battle, each victory fleeting and fragile. Still, I kept trying. Therapy became my anchor, grounding me when emotions threatened to overwhelm me. Dr. Alvarez encouraged me to focus on what I could control rather than dwelling on what I couldn't. "Healing isn't linear," she reminded me during one session. "It's messy, painful, but it's worth it." She was right. Slowly, incrementally, I began to find balance again. Days passed where I didn't think about my ex-wife or Victor Kane or the shattered remnants of my old life. I started taking long runs in the mornings, letting the rhythm of my footsteps clear my mind. I reconnected with old friends, rediscovered hobbies I'd abandoned, and allowed myself to dream about the future instead of clinging to the past. And then, just as I started to believe I was finally moving forward, life threw another curveball. It came in the form of a phone call, one I never expected. "Hey," my ex-wife's voice said on the other end of the line. She sounded nervous, hesitant. "Can we meet? There's something I need to tell you." My stomach tightened. After everything we'd been through, hearing her sound so uncertain sent a jolt of dread through me. "Sure," I replied cautiously. "What's going on?" "It's better if I tell you in person," she said. "I'll explain when I see you." We met at the same park where we'd talked weeks earlier. This time, though, the weather mirrored my mood. Grey skies, drizzling rain, the kind of day that makes you want to stay indoors. She arrived carrying an umbrella, her expression unreadable. "What is it?" I asked as soon as she sat down. "You're scaring me." She took a deep breath, gripping the handle of her umbrella tightly. "Victor, he's out." My heart skipped a beat. "Out? What do you mean out?" "They released him on bail," she explained, her voice trembling. "His lawyer argued that the evidence wasn't strong enough to hold him, and, well, here we are." Anger surged through me, hot and immediate. How is that possible? All the proof we gave them. "I know," she interrupted, tears welling in her eyes. "I don't understand it either. But he's free, and now—" Her voice trailed off, but the implication hung heavy between us. Now he could come after us again. The days that followed were a blur of paranoia and anxiety. I checked my locks multiple times before bed, jumped at every unfamiliar noise, avoided places I thought Victor might frequent. My ex-wife and I stayed in constant contact, updating each other on any suspicious activity. The fear that had driven her to betray me in the first place returned, stronger than ever, and this time, I understood it completely. But I refused to let it consume me. If there was one thing I'd learned over the past year, it was that running from fear only gave it power. So instead of hiding, I decided to fight back. With Claire's encouragement, I reached out to a lawyer friend of mine, asking for advice on how to strengthen our case against Victor. Together, we gathered additional evidence, tracked down witnesses, and prepared to take him to court once and for all. It wasn't easy. Victor had resources and connections we couldn't match, but we were determined to see it through. Through it all, I realized something important. healing doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean pretending the pain never happened or that the scars will disappear. Healing means finding strength in vulnerability, courage in uncertainty, and hope in the face of adversity. It means learning to live again, even when the road ahead seems impossibly hard. The courtroom was cold and sterile, its fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows across the rows of wooden benches. I sat beside my ex-wife, our shoulders almost touching but not quite, a physical reminder of how far we'd come and how much still separated us. Across the aisle, Victor Kane lounged casually in his seat, smirking like he owned the place. His expensive suit and slicked-back hair screamed arrogance, a stark contrast to the nervous tension gripping everyone else in the room. I hated him. Hated the way he looked at us like we were insects beneath his shoe. Hated the fact that he'd reduced my ex-wife to tears countless times, manipulated her into doing unspeakable things, and shattered the life I'd worked so hard to build. But most of all, I hated the power he still held over us, even now, even here. "You okay?" my ex-wife whispered, her voice barely audible over the murmurs filling the room. I nodded, though the truth was more complicated. My hands clenched tightly around the armrests of my chair, knuckles white with effort. Every fiber of my being wanted to leap across the aisle and punch that smirk right off his face. But I couldn't. Not if we wanted justice. Not if we wanted to win. The trial itself was grueling. Day after day, we listened to testimony after testimony, reliving every painful detail of the blackmail scheme. Prosecutors presented evidence, bank records showing suspicious transactions, emails detailing threats, text messages outlining demands. Witnesses recounted their interactions with Victor, painting a picture of a man who thrived on exploiting others' weaknesses. And yet, despite the mounting proof, doubt lingered in the air. Victor's defense team argued that the evidence was circumstantial, that my ex-wife's actions could have been motivated by anything other than coercion. They questioned her credibility, insinuated ulterior motives, and tried to shift blame onto anyone but their client. It was infuriating. Exhausting. At times, I wondered if we'd made a mistake pursuing this at all. What if Victor walked away scot-free? What if all our efforts amounted to nothing? But then I remembered why we were there. This wasn't just about punishing Victor, it was about reclaiming control. About proving to ourselves that we weren't powerless victims anymore. One afternoon, during a recess, Claire showed up unexpectedly outside the courthouse. She stood under an umbrella, shielding herself from the drizzle, her presence both surprising and comforting. When she saw me approaching, she smiled softly, holding out a thermos. "I thought you might need this," she said, handing it to me. "Coffee. Black, no sugar." "Thanks," I replied, managing a weak smile. "What are you doing here?" "I wanted to check on you," she admitted. "You haven't returned my calls in days, and, well, I was worried." Her concern caught me off guard. Over the past few weeks, I distanced myself from her, too consumed by the trial to focus on anything else. I told myself it was temporary, that once this was over, I'd make time for us again, but seeing her standing there, looking at me with such kindness, made me realize how unfair I'd been. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "I should have called. It's just, this whole thing has been overwhelming." She nodded, understanding without needing an explanation. "Do you want to talk about it?" For a moment, I considered brushing her off, giving her the same vague reassurances I always did. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the exhaustion weighing me down, or maybe it was the genuine care in her eyes. Whatever it was, I found myself opening up in a way I hadn't before. "It's messy," I began, my voice low. "Every day feels like a battle. Some days, I think we are winning. Other days," I trailed off, shaking my head. "Other days, I wonder if it's worth it." Claire placed a hand on my arm, her touch warm and grounding. "It's worth it," she said firmly. "Not because of him, but because of you. Because you're fighting for yourself, for your peace of mind. And no matter what happens in that courtroom, don't lose sight of that." Her words stayed with me long after she left, echoing in my mind like a mantra. You're fighting for yourself. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. The verdict came on a Friday afternoon. As the jury filed back into the room, the tension was palpable. My ex-wife gripped my hand tightly, her nails digging into my palm. I didn't pull away. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" the judge asked, his voice calm and steady. "We have, Your Honor," the foreman replied, standing up. Time seemed to slow as he unfolded the slip of paper, his lips moving silently as he read the words. Then, finally, "We find the defendant, Victor Kane, guilty on all counts." A wave of relief washed over me, so powerful it nearly knocked me off my feet. Beside me, my ex-wife let out a choked sob, tears streaming down her face. Across the aisle, Victor's smirk faltered, replaced by a look of shock and disbelief. Justice had been served. In the weeks that followed, life began to settle into a new rhythm. With Victor behind bars, the constant fear that had haunted us for months finally lifted. My ex-wife and I continued to rebuild our relationship, not as lovers, but as allies. Friends. Together, we navigated the complexities of co-parenting. We decided to sell the house and split custody of our dog, Max, and supported each other through therapy sessions that helped us process everything we'd endured. As for Claire, I made a conscious effort to prioritize her. Our relationship wasn't perfect. How could it be, given everything I'd been through? But it was real. Grounded in honesty, trust, and mutual respect. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to believe that love wasn't just possible, it was inevitable. Victor Kane's conviction should have been the end of it. A clean slate. A chance to move forward without looking over my shoulder or wondering when the other shoe would drop. But life, as it often does, had other plans. It started with a letter. I found it in my mailbox one rainy Tuesday afternoon, a plain white envelope with no return address. At first glance, it seemed innocuous enough, but something about it made my stomach churn. Maybe it was the lack of postage stamps, suggesting it had been hand-delivered. Or maybe it was the faint smudge of dirt on the corner, as though it had been handled carelessly. Whatever the reason, I hesitated before opening it. Standing in the doorway of my apartment, rain dripping from my coat, I stared at the envelope like it might bite me. Finally, curiosity, or perhaps morbid dread, won out. I tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded neatly in half. The message was brief, typed in blocky black letters. You think this is over? You're wrong. No signature. No explanation. Just those chilling words, stark against the white page. My hands trembled as I read them again and again, each repetition sinking deeper into my chest like a stone. Who sent it? Victor? One of his associates? Or someone else entirely? Panic set in almost immediately. I called my ex-wife, my voice shaking as I relayed the message. Did you get anything like this? I asked, pacing back and forth across the living room. No, she replied, her tone laced with worry. But maybe I should come over. We spent the evening going over every possibility, dissecting the note like detectives searching for clues. Neither of us slept much that night, jumping at every creak and groan of the building. By morning, exhaustion had settled heavily over us, but the fear remained. The days that followed were a blur of paranoia and frustration. We contacted the police, showed them the note, and begged them to take it seriously. But without concrete evidence or any indication of who might have sent it, there wasn't much they could do. Stay vigilant, they advised. Let us know if anything else happens. Vigilant. Right. As if I hadn't been doing exactly that since the moment I opened the damn envelope. Claire noticed the change in me almost instantly. Gone was the tentative optimism we'd built together. In its place was a gnawing anxiety that colored everything I did. She tried to reassure me, reminding me that we'd faced worse and come out stronger. But her words, though well-meaning, only highlighted how distant I felt, not just from her, but from myself. I can't keep living like this, I confessed one night, sitting on the edge of my bed with my head in my hands. Every shadow feels like a threat. Every sound makes me jump. It's like I'm trapped in some kind of nightmare I can't wake up from. Claire knelt beside me, placing a gentle hand on my knee. Then let's figure it out, she said firmly. Together. Whatever it takes, we'll get through it. Her determination gave me strength, or at least enough to keep moving forward. Together, we installed additional security measures around my apartment. Cameras, motion sensors, even a panic button connected directly to local law enforcement. We reviewed footage daily, searching for anything unusual. Still, the note haunted me, a constant reminder that danger lurked just beyond the edges of my carefully constructed safety net. Then came the unexpected turn of events. One evening, as I was leaving work, a man approached me in the parking lot. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a leather jacket and aviator sunglasses despite the fading light. Something about him screamed intimidation, but it wasn't until he spoke that I realized why. You're the guy who put Victor away, he said, his voice low and gravelly. Figured you'd be smarter than to stick your nose where it doesn't belong. My heart pounded wildly in my chest, adrenaline flooding my veins. Who are you? I demanded, taking a step back toward my car. Just a friend of Victor's, he replied casually, leaning against the hood of his motorcycle parked nearby. And I'm here to deliver a message. Leave it alone. Stop digging. Stop asking questions. Or next time, it won't just be a letter. Before I could respond, he revved the engine of his bike and sped off, leaving me standing there frozen, my mind racing. Was this real? Had Victor really orchestrated this from prison? Or was this someone else entirely, using his name as leverage? I called Claire immediately, recounting the encounter in a frantic rush of words. To her credit, she stayed calm, urging me to report the incident to the police. But deep down, I knew what this meant. The fight wasn't over. Not yet. That night, lying awake in bed, I replayed the conversation in my head over and over again. The man's words echoed like a warning shot, forcing me to confront a truth I'd been avoiding. Justice isn't always final. Sometimes, it comes with consequences you never anticipated. But as terrifying as that realization was, it also sparked something within me, a stubborn refusal to back down. I'd fought too hard, sacrificed too much, to let fear dictate my life now. If Victor, or whoever was behind this, wanted a war, then fine. They'd get one. The days that followed felt like living under a microscope. Every movement, every decision, seemed magnified by the weight of the unknown. I couldn't shake the image of the man in the parking lot, his cold stare, his casual threat, or the way my hands had trembled as I fumbled for my car keys. It wasn't just fear, it was helplessness. A reminder that no matter how much progress I'd made, there were forces beyond my control. And yet, despite the danger looming over me, I refused to retreat. Maybe it was pride, or maybe it was stubbornness, but something inside me refused to let them win. If they wanted a fight, I'd give them one, not recklessly, not impulsively, but strategically. With purpose. Claire became my anchor during those turbulent weeks. She insisted on staying with me at night, claiming she didn't want me to be alone just in case. But I knew better. This wasn't just about safety, it was about solidarity, about showing me that I wasn't facing this alone. Her presence brought a sense of normalcy, a fleeting escape from the chaos swirling around us. "You can't let them break you," she said one evening as we sat together on the couch, watching old reruns of The Office. "They're trying to scare you into silence. Don't give them the satisfaction." Her words hit home, though they weren't easy to hear. She was right. I couldn't let fear dictate my life. But neither could I ignore the reality of the situation. Whoever was behind these threats wasn't playing games. They meant business. The police, unfortunately, were less than helpful. Without concrete evidence tying the threats to Victor or anyone else, their hands were tied. "We'll keep an eye out," Detective Morales assured me during one of our increasingly frequent meetings. "But unless something actionable comes up, there's only so much we can do." Actionable? I snapped, frustration boiling over. What about the note? What about the guy in the parking lot? Isn't that enough? "It's suspicious, sure," he replied evenly. "But suspicion isn't proof. We need more, a name, a face, anything solid to go on." I left the station feeling defeated, anger simmering beneath the surface. Proof. That's all they cared about. Meanwhile, I was living in a state of perpetual dread, wondering when, or where, the next move would come. Then, one night, it did. I woke abruptly to the sound of breaking glass. My heart leapt into my throat as I bolted upright in bed, adrenaline coursing through me. Claire stirred beside me, groggy but alert. "What was that?" she whispered, her voice tight with alarm. Before I could answer, a loud crash echoed from the living room. Someone was inside the apartment. Instinct took over. Grabbing the baseball but I kept near the bed, a precaution I'd installed after the trial, I crept toward the doorway, my pulse hammering in my ears. Claire grabbed my arm, pulling me back. "Don't," she hissed. "Call the police." But it was too late. As I rounded the corner, I saw him, a shadowy figure rifling through my belongings, tossing things onto the floor in a frenzy. He turned at the sound of my footsteps, his face obscured by a ski mask. "Who the hell are you?" I demanded, gripping the bat tightly. "Get out of my house." Instead of answering, he lunged at me. Adrenaline propelled me forward, and I swung the bat with all my strength. It connected with a sickening thud, sending him stumbling backward. He recovered quickly, though, and charged again, tackling me to the ground. We struggled, limbs flailing, grunts of effort filling the air. Claire screamed somewhere behind us, her voice sharp and desperate. "Stop, please." Finally, with a surge of energy, I managed to shove him off me and scrambled to my feet. He hesitated for a moment, then bolted toward the shattered window he'd used to break in, disappearing into the night. By the time the police arrived, breathless and armed, the intruder was long gone. All that remained was the wreckage of my living room, and the lingering sense of violation that clung to every surface. In the aftermath, Claire and I sat side by side on the curb outside my building, wrapped in emergency blankets as officers combed through the scene. Neither of us spoke. There was nothing left to say. The reality of what had happened, and how close I'd come to something far worse, settled heavily between us. Later that night, after everyone had left and the apartment had been secured, Claire turned to me, her eyes red-rimmed and weary. "You can't stay here," she said quietly. "It's not safe." "I know," I admitted, running a hand through my hair. "But where do I go? Running won't solve anything." "No," she agreed. "But staying puts you, and anyone else who cares about you, in danger. You have to think about the bigger picture." Her words struck a nerve. For months, I'd focused solely on myself, on surviving, on fighting back, on reclaiming control. But now, looking at her bruised knuckles from where she tried to intervene, I realized the cost of my stubbornness. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about protecting the people I loved. The next morning, I called my ex-wife. Hearing her voice on the other end of the line brought a strange mix of comfort and guilt. "Hey," I said softly. "Can we talk?" There's something I need to tell you. She listened patiently as I explained everything. The letter, the man in the parking lot, the break-in. When I finished, there was a long pause before she responded. You need to leave town, she said firmly. At least for a while. Until this blows over. I don't want to run, I protested. Not again. It's not running, she countered. It's smart. It's keeping yourself, and everyone else, safe. Please, just trust me on this. For once, I did. Leaving town wasn't easy. Packing up my life, even temporarily, felt like admitting defeat. Like I was giving in to whoever had orchestrated this campaign of fear. But as much as it stung, I knew my ex-wife and Claire were right. Staying put wasn't bravery, it was recklessness. If I wanted any chance at reclaiming control, I had to step back, for now. I ended up renting a small cabin deep in the woods, miles away from civilization. It belonged to an old college friend who owed me a favor, and when I called him out of the blue asking for a quiet place to lay low, he didn't hesitate. Stay as long as you need, he said. No questions asked. The drive there was surreal. The farther I got from the city, the more the tension in my chest began to ease. Skyscrapers gave way to rolling hills, then dense forests blanketed in early morning mist. By the time I pulled onto the gravel road leading to the cabin, I almost felt peaceful. Almost. The cabin itself was rustic but cozy, a one-bedroom structure with chipped paint on the shutters and a fireplace that smelled faintly of wood smoke. A narrow porch wrapped around the front, overlooking a crystal-clear lake that sparkled under the midday sun. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to breathe. Still, solitude has a way of amplifying thoughts you'd rather ignore. Without the distractions of daily life, the noise of traffic, the hum of conversations, the constant buzz of technology, I found myself face to face with everything I'd been trying to outrun. Memories of that night. The trial. The threats. The break-in. Each memory surfaced unbidden, demanding attention like a child tugging at your sleeve. But alongside those memories came clarity. Sitting by the fire late at night, staring into the flickering flames, I began to see patterns in my behavior, patterns I hadn't noticed before. My refusal to leave the city, for instance, wasn't just about standing my ground. It was about proving something, to myself, to others, maybe even to Victor Kane. I wanted to show them I wasn't afraid, that I could take whatever they threw at me and come out stronger. But strength isn't about refusing to bend. Sometimes, it's about knowing when to step back, about choosing survival over pride. Claire visited once during my stay, driving up on a crisp Saturday afternoon with groceries and a stack of books she thought I might enjoy. Seeing her pull into the driveway brought an unexpected wave of relief. Despite the distance between us these past few weeks, she still showed up. Still cared. You look better, she said as she helped me unload the car, her voice light but probing. Less haunted. Thanks, I replied with a wry smile. I think the fresh air agrees with me. We spent the afternoon talking, or rather, she talked while I listened. She told me about work, about mutual friends, about little things happening in the world outside my self-imposed exile. Her stories grounded me, reminding me that life went on even when mine felt suspended in limbo. Eventually, the conversation turned serious. How are you really doing? She asked, her gaze steady. And don't give me the fine answer. I want the truth. I hesitated, weighing my words carefully. It's complicated, I admitted finally. Being here feels like hiding, but at the same time, it's given me space to think, to process everything that's happened. I'm starting to realize how much of this fight has been about proving something, not just to them, but to myself. She nodded, understanding without needing further explanation. There's no shame in stepping back, she said gently. Healing doesn't happen overnight. Sometimes, you need distance to see things clearly. Her words stayed with me long after she left, echoing in the quiet solitude of the cabin. Healing, distance, clarity. They weren't concepts I'd fully embraced until now, but they made sense. For so long, I'd equated moving forward with charging ahead, fists raised, ready to confront whatever came my way. But maybe moving forward meant something else entirely. Maybe it meant learning when to stand firm, and when to walk away. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee and a notebook. Writing had never been my thing, but lately, it felt like the only way to untangle the jumble of thoughts in my head. I started with simple entries, observations about the lake, descriptions of the wildlife, but soon, the words began to flow more freely. Day 12. Today, I saw a deer drinking from the edge of the lake. It stood perfectly still, ears twitching at every sound, alert but calm. Watching it reminded me of something Dr. Alvarez once said. Fear is natural. It keeps us alive. But letting it control us? That's a choice. I used to think fear was weakness. Something to conquer, to push through no matter what. Now, I'm starting to wonder if it's not the fear itself that's dangerous, but how we respond to it. Running isn't always cowardice. Sometimes, it's strategy. Sometimes, it's survival. I don't know what happens next. Whether Victor's people will find me. Whether the police will uncover anything new. Whether I'll ever feel safe again. But for now, sitting here watching the stars come out, I feel okay. Not great, but okay. And maybe that's enough. As I closed the notebook and leaned back in my chair, listening to the gentle lapping of the water against the shore, I realized something important. Revenge might have been immediate, but redemption takes time. And maybe, just maybe, stepping away was the bravest choice I could make. The days at the cabin blurred together, marked only by the rising and setting of the sun. There was a strange comfort in the monotony, waking up to birdsong, brewing coffee on the stovetop, taking long walks along the lake's edge. Without the distractions of city life or the constant weight of fear, I began to feel like myself again. Or at least, a version of myself I hadn't seen in years. But even in solitude, the past had a way of finding me. One morning, as I sorted through some old boxes I'd brought with me, I stumbled upon a photo album I hadn't opened in ages. Its cover was worn, edges frayed from years of use. Flipping it open, I found snapshots of happier times, my ex-wife and me on vacations, at holiday parties, laughing over dinner. Each picture felt like a punch to the gut, a reminder of everything we'd lost. For a long time, I sat there on the floor, staring at those frozen moments, letting the memories wash over me. I thought about the woman she used to be, the one who'd loved me fiercely, who'd stood by my side through thick and thin. And then I thought about the woman she became, the one who betrayed me, yes, but also the one who suffered in silence under Victor's threats. It wasn't forgiveness, exactly, not yet, but it was understanding. For so long, I'd viewed her actions in black and white terms, betrayal versus loyalty, right versus wrong. Now, sitting alone in the quiet of the cabin, I realized how much gray existed between those extremes. She hadn't been perfect, but neither had I. We were both flawed, both human, both trying to navigate a world that often felt too heavy to bear. Later that week, I received a call from Detective Morales. His voice was clipped, urgent. "We've got something," he said without preamble. "Can you talk?" I stepped outside, phone pressed to my ear, as he filled me in. Apparently, the intruder who broke into my apartment had left behind a fingerprint, a partial, but enough to run through the system. It matched a known associate of Victor Kane's, a low-level enforcer named Marcus Hale. "Does this mean we can tie him to Victor?" I asked, my pulse quickening. "Not directly," Morales admitted. "But it's progress. If we can get Marcus to flip, he's small-time, not exactly loyal, we might be able to build a stronger case." Progress. The word felt hollow somehow, like grasping at straws. Still, it was more than we'd had before. More than I'd dared hope for. "Thank you," I said finally. "Let me know if there's anything else I can do." After hanging up, I stared out at the lake, the news swirling in my mind like storm clouds. Progress was good, but it wasn't closure. Not yet. And until this chapter of my life was truly over, I wasn't sure I could move forward completely. That night, sleep eluded me. Instead, I found myself back on the porch, wrapped in a blanket against the chill, staring up at the stars. My thoughts drifted to Claire, to her steady presence, her unwavering support. She'd become such an integral part of my life these past few months, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that I was holding her back. How could I ask her to stand by me when my life was still so uncertain? And then there was my ex-wife. Despite everything, I cared about her deeply, maybe even still loved her in some way. But love isn't always enough. Sometimes, it's not about what you feel, it's about what you're willing to do. About whether two people can find their way back to each other after everything they've endured, or whether they're better off apart. As I sat there wrestling with these questions, a memory surfaced unbidden. The day I threw that wine bottle at the man in my living room. The rage, the betrayal, the sheer shock of it all. It felt like another lifetime now. Back then, revenge had been immediate. Instinctual. A knee-jerk reaction to pain I didn't know how to process. But redemption. Redemption takes time. And maybe, just maybe, that's the point. The next morning, I made a decision. Picking up my phone, I dialed Claire's number. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm and familiar. "Hey, stranger," she teased. "How's cabin life treating you?" "It's peaceful," I replied, smiling despite myself. "Listen, I need to ask you something. Something important." Her tone shifted immediately, growing serious. "What is it?" "I want you to come here," I said, surprising even myself with the words. "To the cabin. Not just for a visit, for a while. There's so much I need to figure out, and I can't imagine doing it without you." There was a pause, then, "Are you sure? I mean, I don't want to intrude." "You're not intruding," I interrupted firmly. "You're helping. You've been helping since the beginning, even when I didn't deserve it. Please, Claire. I need you." When she agreed, relief washed over me like a tide. Knowing she'd be here, with me, felt like anchoring myself to something solid amidst the chaos. A few days later, as we sat together on the porch watching the sunset, I turned to her and said the thing I'd been thinking for weeks. This isn't forever, you know. The cabin. Hiding. Running. None of it. Eventually, I have to go back. She nodded, unsurprised. And when you do? I won't be the same person, I admitted. I can't be. Too much has happened. But maybe that's okay. Maybe it's time to stop fighting the past and start building a future instead. It had been nearly 3 weeks since Claire arrived at the cabin, and for the first time in months, I felt like I was truly living again. Her presence filled the empty spaces, not just in the cabin, but in my heart. Together, we cooked meals, took long walks by the lake, and talked late into the night about everything and nothing. She didn't try to fix me or rush my healing. She simply existed alongside me, a steady force of light in the darkness. But even in the calm, shadows lingered. Every morning, I checked my phone for updates from Detective Morales, hoping for news that would signal the end of this nightmare. So far, there'd been nothing concrete, just vague promises of progress and leads. It was frustrating, yes, but also strangely freeing. For the first time, I allowed myself to imagine a future beyond fear, a life where Victor Kane and his threats no longer held power over me. Then, one crisp autumn morning, the unexpected happened. Claire and I were sitting on the porch, sipping coffee and watching the mist rise off the lake, when a car pulled up the driveway. At first, I assumed it was my friend who owned the cabin, stopping by to check on things. But as the driver stepped out, my blood ran cold. It was Marcus Hale, the man whose fingerprint had tied him to the break-in at my apartment. He stood there for a moment, hands raised in a gesture of surrender, his face pale and drawn. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said quickly, glancing nervously over his shoulder. I need your help." My fists clenched instinctively, anger surging through me. "You've got some nerve showing up here," I spat, rising to my feet. "After everything you've done." "I know what I did," he interrupted, his voice cracking with desperation. "And I regret it, okay? But if you don't listen to me now, we are both dead." The intensity in his tone gave me pause. Beside me, Claire placed a calming hand on my arm. "Let him talk," she whispered. "Just hear him out." Reluctantly, I nodded, motioning for him to sit on the steps below us. He complied, keeping his distance, his hands trembling as he spoke. "Victor didn't go down quietly," he began, his words tumbling out in a rush. "He's got people on the outside, people who don't care about getting caught. They think you're a loose end, and they won't stop until you're gone. Same goes for anyone connected to you. So why come to me?" I demanded, my voice sharp. "Why not run?" "Because I'm tired of running," he admitted, his shoulders sagging under the weight of his confession. "Tired of living like this. If I turn myself in, if I give the cops enough to take them all down, maybe I can make things right. Maybe I can protect you. Protect us." His sincerity caught me off guard. This wasn't the same man who'd broken into my apartment, who'd worked for Victor without hesitation. This was someone broken, desperate, searching for redemption in the only way he knew how. Later that day, after calling Detective Morales and arranging for Marcus to turn himself in, I found myself alone by the lake, staring out at the water. The events of the past few hours replayed in my mind like a loop, each detail sharper than the last. Marcus's confession, his plea for help, the realization that this nightmare might finally be coming to an end. But it wasn't relief I felt, it was something deeper, something quieter. Closure. Revenge had been immediate, yes, an explosive reaction to pain I couldn't process. But redemption. Redemption takes time. It requires patience, understanding, and the willingness to confront not just others, but yourself. And maybe, just maybe, that's the point. As I stood there, the wind rustling through the trees, I thought about everything I'd lost, and everything I'd gained. My marriage hadn't survived, but neither had the bitterness that once consumed me. Claire had become my anchor, my partner in navigating the chaos. And though the road ahead was still uncertain, I knew one thing for sure, I was ready to face it. The next morning, as we packed up to leave the cabin, Claire turned to me with a small smile. "What happens now?" she asked softly. I hesitated, then shrugged. "We go home," I replied. "Together." Home. The word felt strange on my tongue, unfamiliar yet comforting. Home wasn't a place, it was a feeling, a sense of belonging, of being seen, accepted, loved. And for the first time in years, I felt like I had it. But the story doesn't end there. 2 weeks later, as Claire and I settled back into our routines, I received a call from Detective Morales. His voice was grim, almost hesitant. "We've got bad news," he said. "Marcus Hale was found dead in his cell yesterday. Suicide, according to preliminary reports." The room spun around me, the words hitting like a punch to the gut. Suicide. Marcus didn't strike me as someone who would give up so easily, not after everything he'd risked to come forward. Before I could respond, Morales added, "There's more. Someone slipped him a note before he died. It read, 'No one walks away.'" A chill ran down my spine. Whoever was behind this wasn't done. Not yet. And as much as I wanted to believe I'd moved past the fear, the anger, the need for revenge, I realized the fight wasn't over. Not completely. Standing there, phone in hand, I made a silent promise, to myself, to Claire, to everyone who'd stood by me through this ordeal. I wouldn't let them win. Not this time. Not ever. Because sometimes, the bravest choice isn't walking away. It's standing firm.